Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a countdown for the top 10 old school thrash metal albums. So, thrash metal is actually a subgenre under the more general, broader term heavy metal, which emerged in the early 80s, basically building on what the new wave of British heavy metal bands were doing at the time, just adding more speed, bass drum, all that sort of stuff to it. And originally it was a very American thing, not many countries outside of America doing thrash metal. Of course, it would certainly grow and include countries from all over the world today. But this video here is going to be counting down the top 10 old school thrash metal albums. And we're going to get into it here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also, leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this with a countdown for the top 10 old school thrash metal albums. All right, so we are going to kick off here, obviously at number 10, starting with a Phoenix, Arizona band, Sacred Reich, An American Way, their 1990 album. It was their second studio album at the time. This one here showed a large musical progression, building upon what their debut album Ignorance had done back in 1987 and the follow-up EP Surf Nicaragua from 1988. But this one here really taking it to the next level. And one of the things that always stood out to me about this band, Sacred Reich, was frontman Phil Ryan, who plays bass and vocals for the band. But while most thrash metal bands have singers that sing in a higher register, Phil actually sings in a much lower register. And that always stood out to me, setting the band apart, giving them a more unique sound. One of the reasons that drew me into the band as a whole. And so one of the standout tracks on here is the title track itself, The American Way. You might even know it because it appeared in the film Encino Man in 1992, helping to raise the star a little bit for the band itself. I was lucky enough to actually meet the band back in 1991. Was not listening to the band yet. They're actually the first band that I ever met. I just saw that they were coming locally to do an in-store signing and went out to go see them because, you know, that was new to me, sort of a thing, and fell in love with their music going forward from that point. Okay, next up we got a band from San Francisco, California, coming in at number 9, Metal Church, The Dark from 1986. It was their second studio album. And last to feature the classic lineup that would feature David Wayne on vocals, who unfortunately died in 2005. He would go on to play in the band Reverend after this, which is a phenomenal band. If you never checked them out, they're definitely worth checking out. He had a namesake project called Wayne as well, but he would be replaced by Mike Howe, who unfortunately died in 2021, and he came from the band Heretic, and some of the members of Heretic joined up in Reverend as well, so it's kind of an interesting way that those bands came together. But this band here, really known as one of the originators and forefront of thrash metal and what they did. This one here was described as having a much more of a commercial appeal to it, but I wouldn't let that deter you from this album as a whole, because I think it made it far more accessible, and it was what really became of thrash metal music as the decade would progress itself. Check out standout track Ton of Bricks. They had a music video for this at the time, and it was just one of those songs that seemingly really represented the thrash metal movement and the band itself, and always loved that song going forward from this point. All right, so next up we're going to move to a band from Richmond, California, coming in at number 8, Exodus, and their album Bonded by Blood from 1985. Debut studio album from Exodus, and of course can't mention Exodus without mentioning that Kirk Hammett was one time their guitar player before being signed and all. But this album here was actually ready to be released in the summer of '84, but due to record label issues, it got held back until '85. And I've always kind of wondered, if it had come out earlier, would it have made a bigger impact? Would we talk about this album here the way we talk about some of the stuff from the Big Four? Who knows? But this album here is the one and only album to feature frontman Paul Bailoff, who died in 2002. He'd be replaced by Steve Zetro Souza for the follow-up album Pleasures of the Flesh, 1987, a fantastic album. He's still with the band today, but for me, my money has always been on this, the debut. Even though I came in to the band afterward, this is still the album that really stands out to me as a heavily influential album within the thrash metal movement. I still see that it gets cited quite often today. The band would actually re-record this and release a new version of this in 2008 called Let There Be Blood with then frontman Rob Dukes. Of course, he has since been replaced by Steve Souza coming in. But standout tracks on here, title track, of course, Bonded by Blood, but A Lesson in Violence. And really the whole album, start to finish, is really good. Next up, we've got New Jersey thrash band Overkill coming in at number 7 with Taking Over from 1987. Their second studio album was the last one to feature drummer Rat Skates in the group, who was responsible for all of their graphics at the time, t-shirt designs, logo, music video graphics, all that sort of stuff. And I've often said that, you know, for my money, if there had been a 5th band as part of the big 4, Overkill should be that band. I've always thought they totally embodied the thrash metal scene. They're still going today. They kicked off, I think, in 1980, and 44 years later, they are still going. Bobby Blitz Ellsworth has such an amazing vocal. It's not that he's a great vocal, it's just that it stands out to me. It epitomizes some of the most classic sounding thrash metal vocal stylings out there. I'll mention another one as we get later into this. But when I think of thrash, I think of a vocalist like Bobby Ellsworth. And of course, we got Dee Verney, the bassist, who really kind of is the mastermind behind Overkill. But those two guys still with the band today. Some of the standout tracks on here, Deny the Cross, and one of their all-time classic songs, Wrecking Crew, is on here. And I got to see the band as part of the New York Steel show, which was a tribute show or a show to raise money following 9/11. They were part of that bill, one of the first concerts to play, following that tragedy. Okay, moving on. We have a Venice, California band coming in at number 6, Suicidal Tendencies, Lights, Camera, Revolution from 1990, their 5th studio album, certified gold. So some of these thrash metal bands did reach the sort of upper echelon of bands and status and achievements and all that sort of stuff. And Suicidal Tendencies is really considered to be, at the forefront of the crossover thrash metal movement itself, where they mixed hardcore, punk, metal all together. But this album, the band was actually focusing more on their metal roots by this point. And it would also be the first album to feature new bassist at the time, Robert Trujillo, who of course would join Mike Meade, the frontman, in Infectious Grooves, but later on go on to Ozzy Osbourne. And of course, most famously, now he's with Metallica, one of the big 4. So cool to have him classified in here a couple times. And, Mike Meade, known for his lyrical styles, his rants, his storytelling, all that sort of stuff, and just an absolute classic lyricist, in my opinion. So you can't have a countdown without Suicidal Tendencies in it. This album in particular, some standout tracks, You Can't Bring Me Down and Send Me Your Money, which is based on, the story, or not story, but around televangelists and the things that they do to get money and that kind of stuff. Again, tying back into those rants that Mike Meade would have. And I got to see this band open up for Megadeth on their Countdown to Extinction tour. One of my favorite show billings was Suicidal opening up for Megadeth on that tour. Okay, next up, coming in at number 5, we've got Berkeley, California band Testament, Souls of Black from 1990, their 4th studio album. The band really stayed true to their roots on this album, but they added in more of a technical flair and progressive side of elements into the music here, which I think elevated them to that next level. It's the reason I'm actually choosing this album over the 3 previous albums, even though Practice What You Preach from 1989 was the album I first bought by the band. I later found this one and loved this one even more. They're certainly known for the guitar prowess and work of Alex Skolnick, and Chuck Billy is the other guy that I would say, at least during the original classic run era, that has one of those classic thrash metal vocals. So him, along with some of these other guys in here, like Bobby Ellsworth of Overkill, are to me the epitome of what is thrash metal vocal style. Standout tracks on here: Face in the Sky, Souls of Black, and The Legacy. Check those out if you are unfamiliar with this album. All right, and next we've got New York City band coming in at number 4, Anthrax, State of Euphoria from 1988, fourth studio album. This album certified gold, so again, starting to reach some of those upper echelons. Now, Anthrax being part of the big four of thrash, along with Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer. Having said, had there been a fifth one, I think I would have brought Overkill into it. While this album here certainly isn't one of the critical darling albums that most people would cite when talking about Anthrax, like Spreading the Disease from 85 and Among the Living from 87, those of you out there may choose to put that one in. I think that this one here is a far superior album. It just has a more consistent listen for me all the way through. Bigger hits may be on the other ones, and more career-defining songs may be on the other albums. But I don't know, I don't go back to those as often as I go back to this one. This is also the first cassette I got by the group, so maybe it has a lot to do with that. But Joey Belladonna in there, very unique vocal style. He comes from he can sing Journey, he can sing Boston, he can sing all of those more hard rock, melodic rock style singings, but he moved into doing thrash metal stuff to get his foot in the door, and he stayed with it, of course, ever since. We got Scott Ian in there, really the divining person who pushes this band along, and then, of course, Dan Spitz, Frank Bello, Charlie Bellinante, but all 5 of those guys together, really the epitome of thrash metal. Standout tracks, my favorite one on the album, Be All, End All, but also Make Me Laugh. And of course, their cover of Antisocial, which I think brought the band to a bigger audience, even though that's a cover of a song from the band Trust, a French band where they had the lyrics themselves translated into English in order to do the song, and it worked out really well. I have long since gone and found the band Trust and purchased the album that has the original version of the song Antisocial on it. And they had a little bit of post Anthrax covering their song Success too, which was nice. Got to see this band as part of the New York Steel show as well, but I also saw them opening up for Judas Priest on the Demolition tour. All right, coming in at number 3, we got Huntington Park, California band Slayer and South of Heaven from 1988, their 4th studio album at the time, also certified gold, part of the big 4 of thrash, and notable for being produced by Rick Rubin on here, who would become the It producer later on. I mean, he was just starting out at this time doing both thrash and rap bands. But he's certainly now known for reviving the careers of once former big bands or artists. And of course, this time in his career, he was doing these albums, which I think now are looked upon as some of the biggest albums by the bands that he started with. Band lineup being Tom Araya, Kerry King, Jeff Hanneman, Dave Lombardo, all those guys, killer, musicians and artists. Kerry King, of course, out doing his solo thing now, but the band has since reformed because I saw them on their farewell tour, and no longer is it that, because now 4 or 5 years later, whatever it is, they're back out there. They're going to do some summer shows. But standout tracks for this one, the title track, South of Heaven, Live Undead, and Mandatory Suicide. Even though this album here isn't as aggressive as their previous album, I still feel that this is their classic album, and the one that I always reach for. All right, coming in at number 2, we got Los Angeles, California band Megadeth and Rust in Peace, 1990, their 4th studio album at the time, certified platinum. So this band really reaching the upper echelon of thrash metal band charting, success or sales. It was the first album to feature new members Marty Friedman on guitar, and Nick Menza on drums. So adding in a new flavor to the group, it really was a departure from their previous album. And in my opinion, this one here set a new standard for thrash metal music, which was all the more shocking that they would then change their sound for follow-up album, Countdown to Extinction in 1992, essentially getting rid of that level of speed and technical prowess and everything, and going for the more commercially viable, friendly sounds that they did. But this album here has continued to be considered one of the all-time top heavy metal albums, but also thrash metal albums. Standout tracks, opening song on here, Holy War's The Punishment 2, has got to be one of the greatest all-time metal songs to kick off a show with. Love when they come out and do it. It's just blistering, speed metal right there, but then also Hangar 18, which I bought as a CD single long before I really knew who Megadeth was. Picked it up because it had some unreleased tracks. The cover looked cool. I kind of knew who they were, sort of a thing. And my love for the band just grew there. But as I mentioned, I got to see them on the Countdown to Extinction tour when Suicidal was opening for them. Okay, and the number one band is also a Los Angeles, California band, Metallica, Master of Puppets, 1986, their third studio album. Yes, I did not choose to go with the Black Album, which I know a lot of people would, at least in the mainstream metal world. But this one here, truly a thrash metal album. Last one to feature bassist Cliff Burton too, where, his life was cut short in the tragedy where their bus crashed. And even without, radio play, MTV play, because there were no videos made for this. The album at the time sold 1 million copies. Since that time, though, it has sold well over 7 million copies. And I actually just looked it up before filming this episode and see that it is very, very near hitting the 8 million mark as well. For me, the band really comes into their own. I love the first two albums, but it's this album here that has a real step up in the level of production on it. And epic tracks that are on this, like Battery, and of course Master of Puppets, which is riding high ever since that song was reused in Stranger Things. Welcome Home Sanitarium, one of the first songs that would get played on the radio along with One. But my favorite track on here is actually the instrumental song Orion. That one's always really stood out to me and I loved it. But there you go, my countdown for the top 10 old school thrash metal albums. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Certainly let me know which albums you would include in the list, if there's one I left off that you think should have been here. But what would be your number one old school thrash metal album? All right, everyone, take care, have a good time, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.